Heartland Farm Partners President Jeff Peterson is our market analyst this week. The U.S. Department of Agriculture released the monthly world agricultural supply and demand estimates on Tuesday. Traders were not surprised to see USDA cut estimates for the South American corn crop. The report predicts a record Brazilian soybean crop of 115 million metric tons, while cutting the Argentine soybean crop to 40 million metric tons. Domestically, USDA raised corn ending stocks, now totaling 2.182 billion bushels. U.S. soybean ending stocks were decreased 5 million bushels, now at 550 million bushels. With the WASDE report released, traders and producers now look to planting progress. We spoke with Jeff on Thursday afternoon and began by asking him how the report looked for the U.S.
Yeah, that was a good report that actually came out. We were always a little worried as we get the quarterly stocks numbers out of the way and exactly how they're going to incorporate those into the April, but we came out good. Actually came in 10 million bushels less on the corn side than what the trade was expecting. Now we were up 55 million bushels. That'd have been nice if it was lower, but it wasn't. They came in and they did lower the feed demand. And as a result, they also did go ahead and lower a little bit over there on the food, seed, and industrial use. And over similarly on the bean side, we're a little surprised. They actually came in 20 million bushels less than what we were expecting on the trade side. So that's always good to get it less than the trade, and actually came in even less than what we ended up seeing last month. That came in because we ended up seeing the crush higher. Unfortunately, we did end up seeing the seed and the residual a little bit lower, but overall it's still good. We're smaller than we were last year.
Let's talk about the world numbers. What did we see, and were there any surprises for you?
You know, overall on the world side, you never know quite what to expect there, but you know, I would say there was a few surprises, but let's start with some of the ones that were a little more certain. We expected to see them to raise the production on beans for Brazil. We also expected to see them lower the corn numbers from Brazil also. And I think we could see that number go down more as we go forward. I think there's some weather items that could come into play in the southern parts of Brazil. Argentina is where I'd probably say we ended up seeing some of our bigger surprises. And the big surprise came in the bean number. They overall ended up lowering beans 7 million metric tons. That's over 250 million bushels. Now there was a lot of talk that it would be that low, but you never know for sure whether or not the USDA will bring it down. Probably the bigger surprise though, Bryce, is the fact that since the discussion about Argentina got started, that crop came down 17 million metric tons, which would be almost 625 million bushels.
Now, as you look at that, what impacts do you think that South America production will now have on U.S. markets?
I think it's going to have, you know, there could be some bigger ones. I think we're probably going to see some bigger things overall on the corn side than the beans, but this bean story probably isn't done yet. The main reason I say that is that Argentina is a big player on the meal side. They take care of about 49% of the world's soybean meal exports. And we've seen some things happening this week that you don't see often coming out of Argentina, and that's the fact that they're actually booking some U.S. soybeans. Now, that's not that that doesn't ever happen. It last happened back in 1997 when they had some tightness. In that particular year, they ended up bringing in about 18 million bushels. So far, between yesterday and today, they've booked about 5 cargoes of beans, which would amount to just shy of, say, 9 million bushels of beans so far. So it definitely will have an impact, and we'll have to keep an eye on Brazil and Argentina going forward to work into our marketing plans.
WASDE is now behind us. What are the biggest factors we'll be looking at as we shift now into April?
And it's going to be all about U.S. weather. And you know, fortunately, we're kind of in a pocket where we probably have got some guys that are talking about planting sometime next week. We had a few that we're talking to today that said, you know, maybe late this weekend, maybe with the weather, we'll see. But the bigger thing that we're looking at on the crop progress, those numbers came out on Monday, showed we were just 2% planted nationally. 3% is kind of where we were at last year. 2% is where we're at on kind of a 5-year average. So overall, we're not off to a slow start, but I think what we've got though with the weather in the northern plains is going to be a slow and cold start to this planting. We're going to have to keep an eye on that.
Well, you talk about the weather, and a lot of people are anxious to get back in the fields. They do think we're kind of behind right now, but as you mentioned, we're right on pace.
Yeah, we aren't much off. I think the bigger concern is ultimately the forecast that we have in front of us still looks like it's not going to be ideal conditions by no means.
Let's talk about spring wheat for a moment, and we might see some acreage shifts in there, won't we?
I think we possibly could. We're watching that very close. You know, there was about 1 million acres more being talked about in North Dakota, 400,000 plus in Minnesota. The big concern is they just don't have much planted yet. They got about 2% planted. 4% last year at this time is where they'd have been. 6% is kind of the 5-year average. The possibility that we could see is if they don't get as many of those acres planted, it could go ahead and move over to soybeans and give us some more soybean acres there. So we'll have to watch the Dakotas in relation to the spring wheat acres very close.
As we begin to wrap up here, Jeff, let's talk about old crop and what action farmers should be taking on that.
Yeah, I'd say on the old crop side, this is definitely an area, if you've got some bushels that are still in the bins on the old crop corn, I would use this an area to make some incremental sales in here and just continue to work your way along. And as we move over also, I think it's a good time to think about those new crop sales, in particular on the corn side. If we would end up getting corn, our next target that we like would be in that 418 area. We think that's an area where you could make some additional sales if you haven't made some. However, we do think time is going to be our friend, and I think further we go down the road, we'll have an opportunity to make some, sales at higher prices than where we are today.